Chris Sale overcame multiple seasons lost to injury to dominate and win the Cy Young in 2024. I don't think it's a given that was just a fluke. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Monday, February 10th, your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well, and you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. And just like we did last week with the position players, we're going over the pitchers this week and their projections for their stats in 2025. With pitchers and catchers reporting on Wednesday, I tried to set that time frame up so we could talk about what we absolutely know going into Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday was available for us to talk about the guys who actually showed up and everything. And so today is the top of the rotation, right? We're going to get to Spencer Schwellenbach and what can he do with a full season in the majors. We're going to get to Reynaldo López and some of the worries about him potentially regressing. But first, I want to talk about Chris Sale. Because in some of the weird, persistent negativity among Braves fans on social media this offseason, I'm guessing it's because we didn't really sign anybody until Jurickson Profar inked in January. But there's been this idea that Chris Sale's 2024 Cy Young campaign was a bit of a fluke, and that he's bound to be hurt and or ineffective in 2025. So I want to talk about that, because I don't necessarily think that is the case. Let's talk about what Chris Sale did, what the projection systems think he's going to do, and the odds that he could beat those projections. So in 2024, 29 starts for Sale, and famously here, he missed that final start of the year and was unavailable for the wild card round with those back spasms. We're getting to that. 29 starts, 18-3 with a 2.38 ERA and 177 2/3 innings. That ERA, I'm not going to call it fluky. It was a little bit of an overperformance over some of the expected numbers, right? 2.80 ERA is the expected ERA for Sale. So a little bit of overperformance, but the fielding independent pitching for Chris Sale in 2024 was actually the best mark in the league of 209. Real ones can remember all of those triples hit to Jorge Soler. It felt like it always happened to Soler in the outfield when Sale was on the mound. With a league average defense behind him, supposedly, he would have been even better than the 2.38 ERA he actually put up. Okay? And it came out to 6.2 WAR. Now, the projections for 2025 have him taking a small step back. Okay? 31 starts, so more starts, 182 innings, more innings, not by much, but more innings. 14-7 record, 3.03 ERA. His strikeout rate ticking down a little bit from 11.4 to 11.07 strikeouts per nine. His walks ticking up from 2 walks per nine to 2.3 walks per nine. And his WAR coming in at just 4.6 WAR. And I think it's important to understand here that projection systems are inherently conservative, right? When you pull up Fangraphs, and this prediction comes from the depth charts on Fangraphs, that combines Zips and Steamer with expected playing time, right? The depth chart projections on Fangraphs only have one pitcher in Major League Baseball even breaking 5 WAR. If you're curious, it's Tariq Skubal of the Detroit Tigers, who won the Cy Young. He's getting 5.5. Last year, 8 different pitchers had over 5 WAR, including 4 guys in the 6s. Tariq Skubal, Hunter Green had 6.3. Sale had 6.2. Zach Wheeler had 6.1. And then just for fun to round the list out, Paul Skeens had 5.9, and not a ton of starts, actually. Eric Fetty somehow had 5.6. Seth Lugo had 5.3. Reynaldo López had 5.1. And a little bit of a step back in a lot of the conventional statistics. Okay, that's fine. But I think the biggest thing for me is, and let's be clear real quick before I move on, 3.03 ERA is still very good. You're still very happy if Chris Sale gives you an ERA of 3 over 31 starts. You take it. I have no complaints. If that's the projection we get, am I going to be sad he's not in the low 2s? Yes, but that is perfectly acceptable if that's what you got at Chris Sale. A 3 ERA and 31 starts, you'll take it. The thing for me is the assumption that he's just going to be hurt again, right? I know that Chris Sale was hurt a lot in Boston, okay? I went in here and looked at all of the injured list stints that Chris Sale has had since 2018, okay? And some of them are a little bit like just fluky. Some of them are odd. Some of them are, I don't think a lot of these things are lingering concerns we should worry about. Okay. July 2018, left shoulder inflammation. Oh, that sucks. But it happens to a lot of pitchers. In that same season, Atlanta put 4 different arms on the IL with shoulder inflammation. Not a big deal. Tommy John surgery. He had an elbow issue in 2019. Missed all of 2020 with the Tommy John. Came back in 2021 from the Tommy John later in the year. Went on to the COVID-19 IL in September of 2021. Guess what? 186 players went on the COVID IL in 2021. Fluky thing. 2022, he had a stress fracture in his ribs that happened while he was throwing live batting practice during the lockout. Okay? Totally sucks. Yes, don't get me wrong. That is a baseball injury. He got injured while doing baseball activities. I don't know if that's the kind of thing that's recurring, and I don't think that something like that happens, or is probably less likely to happen if there's not a lockout. Simply because you have a MLB training staff there to help you, okay? He came back in July, took a comebacker to the hand that broke his pinky finger. That's not his fault. And then he wasn't able to make it back off the IL because he fell off a bicycle and broke his wrist while he was on the IL. Totally sucks. Not a baseball injury. That's fluky. June of 23, he had the stress reaction in his shoulder blade. If I remember correctly, that is a very rare injury for a pitcher. I dug a little bit. Jacob deGrom dealt with that in 2022. Michael Wacha dealt with that in 2014. There's just not a lot of stress reactions in the shoulders. Essentially, it's a bone bruise. It's a lot more common in the lower body, your hips and things like that, right? There's a couple small things that are baseball injuries, right? The back spasms. I have back spasms, not a big deal, right? The stress fracture in the ribs in the offseason while he was training, right? But here's the thing, like a lot of these injuries are fluky or one-time things that never really came back. The stress fracture, that didn't come back. The shoulder, he said, was fine all year last year. That didn't come back. I don't really think that Chris Sale's any more injury prone at this point, now that he got back to full health, than really any other random pitcher is. Because the worst thing you can do for your body as a pitcher is pitch. It's not good for your body. If you don't believe me, go back to the video of Spencer Strider back in December. On this feed, we have a show about Spencer Strider talking about how he got hurt last year. And he discussed you never feel good in a season. As a pitcher, you never really feel good because it's not a natural motion on your body to throw that hard and that many times. And I don't think that Chris Sale is any more injury prone than any other pitcher would be in their mid to late 30s, right? And I personally think he's going to be probably not the same level that he was in 2025 or in 2024, because usually you overperform all your expected stats in those Cy Young years. That's just kind of how it works. Go look at Blake Snell's Cy Young years versus his other ones and see how he's overperformed a lot of the inputs to win a Cy Young. There's a lot of guys in general do that. But I do think he's still going to be a top of the rotation guy next year. No concerns there. However, there are concerns with Reynaldo López. We'll get into that next right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby talking about the top of the Braves rotation and their projections in 2025. And Reynaldo López is a really interesting one. I devoted the whole newsletter to this back in, I want to say it was early December, maybe. Reynaldo López significantly outperformed a lot of his peripherals last year, okay? So here's what he actually did. 25 starts. There was 26 total appearances. He had one bullpen appearance when he came back off the IL that second time. He went 8-5 with a 1.99 ERA in 135 2/3 innings. 9.8 strikeouts per 9 innings, 2.8 walks, and he was per 9 innings, and he was worth 5.1 WAR. But 1.99 ERA, fielding independent pitching of 2.92. So almost a full run higher. Expected ERA of 3.94. So almost 2 full runs higher than his actual ERA. And a lot of that comes from the fact that Reynaldo López, his primary pitch is his fastball, 55% usage on the heater, right? Slider, curve, change behind it. He doesn't get a ton of ground balls, okay? 39.6%, like 34th percentile in baseball. And so because he's throwing a lot of fastballs, which inherently get hit harder than a lot of other pitches, just on average, and he's not getting a lot of ground balls, he gives up a lot of barrels, he ends up giving a lot of extra base hits and things like that. His barrel rate, 8.8%, 26th percentile. His hard hit rate, 42.2%, 20th percentile, right? A lot of things had to go right for Reynaldo López to get out of a lot of those situations he ended up being in and not giving up a ton of runs. And I'm not saying it's luck, but I'm not saying that luck doesn't play a role in things like that. If you give a random MLB pitcher 50 situations where there's runners in scoring position and 2 outs, and they get out of, 40 of them without allowing runs, the next time you run that again, it's probably going to be less than 40 situations where they get out of it with no runs allowed. I say this all the time, 2 things can be true at once. He was pretty good at getting out of those situations without allowing too much damage last year. That's not always guaranteed to happen in those situations. Regression to the mean is a legitimate and actual thing. And when you look at the projections for Reynaldo López, they're a little more pessimistic than some of the other pitchers are because they're accounting for more regression to the mean in those pivotal situations than maybe for somebody else, okay? Again, 1.99 ERA last year. The projections for this year, the workload's there. I'll get to the workload in a second. 31 starts, 3.56 ERA. A lot of the inputs are the same. 9.6 strikeouts per 9, very close to 9.8 last year. 3.02 walks per 9, very close to the 2.8. 3.1 WAR. A lot of that comes back to, again, his expected ERA was 3.94. His fielding independent pitching was 2.92, and rather than him significantly outproducing them both, the projections have him coming in somewhere in the middle between those two numbers. I do still think the ERA projection's a little bit too conservative, right? I've got him coming in somewhere around a 3 ERA. And to me, that's enough to put him right in that number 3 starter, postseason starter kind of bucket, right? I legitimately think Reynaldo López is no doubt a postseason starter for you. And the innings thing is interesting to me, okay? 135 2/3 innings after going from multiple years of around 65 or 66 in relief. To me, you couldn't have asked for much more than that. 40% is usually the year-over-year workload increase you see outside of situations like this, where it's converting from relief to starting. And in that case, 135 seems to be where these things always end up. And in these projections now, they have him going to 173 innings. And so this is one of the reasons why people say you haven't really replaced. Charlie Morton's been one of your most reliable starters in the last few seasons. And that is true, right? 21 through 24. Charlie Morton never made less than 30 starts in a year. He never pitched less than 163 1/3 innings. Okay? I think that Reynaldo López is going to be able to take those innings that Charlie Morton pitched. He may not hit 2021's 185. That's the year when Morton led baseball in starts with 33. But I think last year's 165 or something like that is entirely doable. And I think that Reynaldo López, even if he just hits the prediction, right? You'll remember the projection here from Fangraphs again was 3.56 ERA. Charlie Morton's 4-year career in Atlanta, the second time, we're not counting the first time. His 4 years in Atlanta, the second stretch, his average ERA, his ERA over that span was a 3.87. So if Reynaldo López nails that projection from Fangraphs, okay, a 3.56 ERA and 173 innings, he has not only replaced Charlie Morton's workload, he's improved on Charlie Morton's workload. The last season, Morton's ERA was a 4.19. Year before that, it was a 3.64. Year before that, it was a 4.34. So when people say you haven't replaced Charlie Morton, the replacement for Charlie Morton is Reynaldo López. And he's not just a replacement, he's an improvement. And when you do that, if Reynaldo López improves on what Charlie Morton gave you, now you're not trying to replace 170 innings and 30 starts. Now you're trying to replace 135 innings and 25 starts. And that's a much easier threshold to beat than trying to replace Charlie Morton's workload. You're trying to replace the Reynaldo López workload. And again, the relief to starting seems to be around 135 innings or so. This is a preview of Tuesday's show. I think Grant Holmes can probably give you that if he's in the rotation all year. Again, we'll get to that in tomorrow's show. But the other guy you lost this offseason was Max Fried. And I do think you haven't replaced him, but I do think there is a replacement already on the roster in Spencer Schwellenbach. And we'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today here on Monday, going over the projections for the top of Atlanta's rotation and what to expect from these guys in 2025. And we get to Spencer Schwellenbach, and I legitimately don't know if there's anybody on this roster that I might be higher on than Spencer Schwellenbach. Maybe Michael Harris. I think Michael Harris could be a Gold Glove center fielder and go 25-25 or 30-30. So maybe Michael Harris. But Spencer Schwellenbach, I think when you just look at the results he had last year, I think it's a little bit misleading as to how good he actually was. Okay? 21 starts last year. 8-7, 3.35 ERA, and 123 2/3 innings. That's really close to what you got from López, right? He had 135. 9.2 strikeouts per 9 for Schwellenbach, 1.7 walks per 9, one of the best control guys on the team, 2.7 WAR. The projection for him this year is somehow worse than that. The Fangraphs projection for Schwellenbach in 2025, 29 starts, 12-8 record, great, 3.71 ERA. They see him being 0.4 of a run worse and getting 165 innings. His strikeouts going from 9.2 per 9 to 8.7 per 9. His walks increasing from 1.7 to 2.1 per nine. And then his WAR, despite an extra 40-something innings, coming in at 2.7. The exact same as it was last year. And I don't really understand this projection, okay? For a couple reasons. One, have you looked at his StatCast? Because it is very red and there is very little blue on it. Spencer Schwellenbach was one of the best in baseball at several categories, okay? Run value as a pitcher overall, which is a rate stat. To be 82nd percentile at plus 11, despite the fact he only threw 123 innings, very impressive. Chase rate, 96th percentile, 34.2%. One of the best in all of baseball. Walk rate, 95th percentile, 4.6%. Barrel rate, 90th percentile, 4.9%. If there's an area where he's deficient, he did get hit, he did get hard hit a little bit. 39th percentile, 39.8%. But because a lot of those were ground balls, his barrel rate was really good. When he was giving up a hard hit ball, it was on the ground. And you'd think the defense can take care of that. The biggest thing to me, though, is the innings projection. Okay? Because Schwellenbach's projected for 165 innings. And when you talk to people outside of the Braves media ecosystem about this roster for next year, and you bring up Schwellenbach, they all say they're worried about his ability to increase his workload. Because 123 was already so high from what it was the year before. He had 65 innings in 2023. And he went to 123 and 2/3 in 2024. But here's the thing. He threw more than that. Because everybody's forgetting he started off in the minors. When you include what he did in high A and in double A, Spencer Schwellenbach threw 168 and 2/3 innings last year. Really, he needed to get one more out somewhere. Just honestly, it would have been much nicer on the sheet. But he threw 169 innings, essentially, last year. It doesn't really track that he would back up to 165 in this upcoming season. I think this is one of the areas where the projection systems don't take everything into account. I understand major league innings are tougher than minor league innings. Yes, I'm fully aware of that. It just doesn't seem to me that you'd ignore them, however. They're there. He did them. He threw them. And all of the associated work that comes with that. The bullpens, the ramp up in spring, all of that stuff. He did all of that stuff. I'm personally an over on the innings count. I think barring health, a thing for everybody, every pitcher, right? I think Schwellenbach throws more than 165 innings. I also think he does better than a 3.71 ERA because the 3.35 from last season also a little bit misleading. If you remember, he came up and really struggled at his coming from double A straight to the majors, and even then he was barely in double A. I mean, 2 starts in Mississippi. His first 6 outings, 1-4, 5.68 ERA. From the beginning of July through the end of the season, Spencer Schwellenbach went 7-3 with a 2.54 ERA. He only once allowed more than 3 earned runs in any start in that stretch. So to project him to not only regress from that, but to regress over a full run from what he did when his feet were underneath him at the major league level blows my mind. I am absolutely an under on an ERA of 3.71. I am over on 165 innings. And honestly, I think he'll improve on that 2.7 WAR. My bold prediction for this season, when it comes to the pitching, is that at the end of this season, Spencer Schwellenbach is considered a number 2 in just about anybody's rotation. That he's one of the top 50 pitchers in baseball. If you were to rank every single guy right now, again, at the end of the season, Spencer Schwellenbach's a top 50 player. top 50 pitcher in the sport. That's how high I am on him. And this comes in for me with the conversation on Max Fried leaving. Okay? Since Max Fried's been in Atlanta, he's averaged 32 starts a year, despite all the injured list stints. I know. His 162 game average is 32 starts a year, and his career ERA in Atlanta is a 3.07. Last year, he made 29 starts, 174 and a third innings, with a 3.25 ERA. I think Spencer Schwellenbach can beat all of those numbers. He can beat 29 starts. He can beat a 3.25 ERA. He can beat 174 and a third innings. Now, will he on all three? He'll probably miss somewhere, right? He'll probably miss on the innings, or he'll miss on the ERA by a skosh or something like that. But when you're trying to figure out how does Atlanta replace Charlie Morton and Max Fried, those guys are already on the roster in Reynaldo López and Spencer Schwellenbach. And so now, what you're trying to replace is you're trying to replace Schwellenbach's 120 innings. Now, they need to be good innings, right? 350 or so would be an adequate replacement for what Schwellenbach did. Can Grant Holmes give you that? Maybe. Can Ian Anderson give you that? Maybe. Can AJ Smith-Shawver give you that? The stuff is there. Maybe. We'll get to him more tomorrow. Can Bryce Elder give you that? Probably not. He can give you the innings. He probably can't give you the ERA. But the point is, you feel a lot better about the rotation going into spring training if you think of it as we are not trying to replace Charlie Morton's innings and Max Fried's innings. We're trying to replace two guys who averaged 130 innings apiece. Because right now, you can see 3-4 dudes in this farm system, plus another one or two on the major league roster, who could probably give you 130 innings. Ian Anderson could probably do it. He's coming off of Tommy John. I don't know. He did throw in the minors last year, so there's maybe. I don't know. I feel confident that Grant Holmes could do it. Bryce Elder can probably do it, although the ERA would be the question there. AJ Smith-Shawver could probably do it. There's a possibility you could combine some different prospects to call up and do it. Some combination of Drew Hackenberg and Lucas Braun could probably give you that many innings. That ignores you've got Davis Daniel in the farm system. He could possibly do it. You've got guys who can throw. It's a little simplistic. You can find 120 innings. You can find a guy who can throw 120 innings. It's a lot harder to find a guy throw 170. And AA made essentially that point to us earlier in the offseason. That innings per start and number of starts and number of innings in a season, like that's what's hard to find. You can find a 120 inning guy. Now, are you going to find the guy with the combination of the ERA and the innings and all of that? A bigger question. And again, I don't think Bryce Elder could do it. We'll talk about that more on Tuesday's show in the third segment. But it's a lot easier to replace two 120 inning guys than it is to replace 270 inning guys. And thankfully, Atlanta doesn't need to do that because their replacements are already here and already in this rotation. This has been Braves Today for Monday, February 10th. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell when we drop the next episode. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.